Hi, so welcome. I'm here. I'm Frances Goodall from francisgoodall.com and the Women's Wellness Circle.com as well. And I'm also a coach, therapist, and author. And I'm here today with Sjanie Hugo Wurlitzer and Alexandra Pope. Hello.
Hello.
So Alexandra and Sjanie are the co-authors of Wild Power, this incredible book on discovering the magic of your menstrual cycle and awakening the feminine path to power. And they're also the founders of the Red School. And they are authors, experts in the field of women's well-being and spirituality as well. And Alexandra has a background as a psychotherapist, and Sjanie is the founder of the Fertile Body Method. So if you want to add anything to your amazing profile, you can do, or you can dive into the first question, which is really about how following our cycles can support us in learning the art of self-care.
I think we just dive into the first question. It's much more interesting to respond than talk about ourselves. Sjanie, why don't you kick it off?
Yeah, so about menstrual cycle and the art of self-care. Well, it's great. I sort of think about my discovery of self-care actually really kicked in for me when my menstrual cycles returned. If I think back now, because I was on hormonal contraception for about 7 years. And in retrospect, during those 7 years, so I was on the injections, so I had absolutely no menstrual cycle. And those 7 years I sometimes call like the 7 lean years. And it was a really difficult time in my life. You know, things were really stuck and I felt sort of deadened and a bit flat and a bit grey, if you like. And I had no idea about how to care for myself in any way, shape or form. And that's partly because of just not really learning that growing up, but also because I realized now I just had no connection to myself. You know, without my menstrual cycle, I was really disconnected from myself, disconnected from my own needs, disconnected from my kind of emotional landscape, disconnected from my own energy pattern and rhythm. So in those 7 years, it was, there was just I just had no idea about self-care. And then really when my cycle returned, I discovered this, it was like the lights went on inside me. And suddenly I started to feel myself, and I could feel my moods and energy so much more clearly, almost starkly. It was like suddenly like, whoa, I realized I was an emotional creature, and that my emotions and my energy are following this ebb and flow, that there is this very clear pattern of mood and energy that is carrying me through every month. And when I started to feel that and have a sense of that, I was able to respond to that more and more easily. So then suddenly the next thing is like, oh, right, this pattern that's happening inside me, this shift in mood and energy is something that I can predict. It's something that happens over and over again. So I can start planning for it. I can start accommodating it. I can start managing my own expectations around what I'm going to be capable of and not capable of, depending on where I'm in my cycle. So suddenly the whole world of self-care just opened up for me, actually, when my cycle came back. It was like, oh, right, I'm connected to myself, and there's this whole way of knowing myself that I just didn't have access to before. And now, my menstrual cycle it's just the centerpiece in my life. It's the foundation of my self-care. It's just really the be-all and the end-all. You know, I'm completely obsessed with my cycle because it helps me to know myself and care for myself in a way that I couldn't do without my menstrual cycle. So, yeah,
it's this wonderful rhythm, Frances, of activity and rest.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about it as a rhythm of sustainability. It is, all cycles, a day-night cycle is the same. The seasonal, the big seasons we're living through. It's this pattern of kind of quiescence and ebullience, inner and outer, and keeping with this rhythm keeps us I want to say kind of flexible. And I think if you're the same, if you try to keep the same all the time, that's a recipe for deadness.
So and stress and huge amounts of stress. You're fighting this kind of natural, organic rhythm. Yeah.
And it means then you've got more resilience and responsiveness to life when you've got these different kinds of ways of being within you. But above all, you've got this rhythm of rest and activity. And we are deluding ourselves if we think that we can just keep going 24/7 in the same top gear. And we can't. It's bad for not just our bodies, but also our souls. And so when you hitch your wagon to the menstrual cycle, as I like to say, you're really hitching yourself to a really lovely, wise guide. And you're also hitching yourself to yourself, because it's a way of being in touch with yourself, as Sjanie was saying. So, and this is everything, to be in touch with yourself, to know how you're doing and feeling. And it's also, you're connected to a pattern where you're reminded of times, there's times for rest and there's times for activity. And that is just the bedrock of any well-being, is this activity rest cycle. And the other really important thing that's going on here, Frances, with self-care in the menstrual cycle, is that when you're pacing yourself, which is what you're doing when you practice cycle awareness, when you're conscious of your cycle each day, what you're doing is you're actually pacing your nervous system. And it's basically a way of keeping, when you're pacing your own nervous system, you are, in a sense, soothing yourself, or keeping yourself as soothed as possible. And you'll know when you're going out of range of what your nervous system can cope with. And your cycle just kind of holds you to something. It's so interesting. So you've got this kind of self-soothing mechanism going on, which is everything in terms of self-care, I think. Very strongly, I feel that, yeah.
Wonderful, thank you. Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm so grateful for your incredible body of work, and I know personally it's affected me so deeply. And following my cycle is just a key part of my life and how I run my business and my family life and everything. So, and your contribution to that. So thank you. So can you talk us all through a little bit more about our cycle as our inner seasons, and the different phases of our cycles as different seasons, and also how that can influence our self-care and the kind of self-care we might need at different specific stages in our cycle?
Yeah, very good. Because this is like sort of the first step in a way of getting to know your cycle. Is, well, number one is practicing cycle awareness, which is just paying really close attention to where you are in your cycle. So that's knowing what day you're on, but also having a sense of what your mood and energy is like on that day. And then also beginning to explore your cycle through this lens of what we call the inner seasons, which is these 4 phases of the cycle. So let me just say what they are first. So the inner winter that's the phase of menstruation. So it actually starts a day or 2 before you begin to bleed, is included in the inner winter. And then during your days of menstruation, so however long that might last, let's say day 5 or 6 roughly is going to be your inner winter. And then your inner spring is the phase of pre-ovulation that follows after that. So that's roughly so I'm talking classic 28-day cycle, roughly day 6 up to about day 11. That's your inner spring. And then the inner summer is ranging across sort of the time of ovulation, so about day 12 to day 16 or so. If you ovulate on day 14, that's your inner summer. And then following that, the premenstruum, that's about day 17, coming back to, say, day 26 or day 27, that's the inner autumn. So those are the 4 phases. And paying attention to those and noticing what phase you're in your cycle will give you a lot of insight and guidance, and it really gives you a way of caring for yourself, because each phase is asking something very particular of you, just very much like the seasons of the year. One has to adapt to the season, and very much the same is happening in our body. We're going through these inner shifts, and we're needing to meet those changes in a certain way and respond to them and honor them in a certain way. So Alexandra, yeah, go on.
I'd like to just come in, Sjanie, because those phases also have very particular powers in them, which are deeply nourishing to our body and soul to be able to access those powers. There's like real juice there for us to harness, I suppose, if you like, to draw upon, which really enhances our sense of self and sense of wholeness, really. It gives us, when you start to really become conscious of the 4 phases of the cycle, and to work with what, Sjanie, I think did you use the word sort of demands or what that
what the cycle is asking of you, what each phase requires.
If you meet those, you there are these lovely powers that you can enjoy, and then each phase leads into the next, and there's a sense of becoming more integrated and whole. So for example, we might perhaps just riff backwards and forwards, Sjanie, on
okay, can I just say one other thing, because I'm loving that image you're painting, and I'm thinking about kind of healing and wellness here. Another way of thinking about it is that each season is like its own little medicine chest that has very particular medicines, and you sort of need to dip into each medicine chest in order to keep the whole system, mind, heart, body, spirit, whole and healthy and well. And to dip into these medicine chests, there is a certain way of being that really helps you to access that. So that's what we're going to just speak about a little bit more now.
Yeah, well, should we go and rifle the medicine chest of menstruation?
Yes, let's go look at that. That one, I would actually, it's not so much a medicine chest, it's a treasure trove, that one. It's a pot of gold.
Yeah, this is actually, the inner winter is just so powerful and important to care for. And it's the one that we least value, actually. We just feel that we should just override menstruation and keep going. It's sort of motto we have in our culture. And menstruation, the tendency is for us to want to really come inwards and drop and let go. And of course, that's the thing we're often fighting. So the inner winter is all about just surrendering. This is the time when you don't push. This is the time where you actually just pull away from the world. It is the rest moment in the monthly cycle. And resting at menstruation has such huge dividends that you don't get at any other time of the menstrual month. So, I mean, it's important to rest any old time. We need rest all the time. But when you deeply rest at menstruation, many other things happen there. And it's like when you let go, firstly, one of the most loveliest of things that happens, well, there's this natural cleansing that goes on. So each menstrual month, you get the opportunity to literally kind of detox. And I'm talking about a kind of emotional detox, a kind of just a release of stuff and life and all the kind of pressures that are built up. And if you allow yourself to follow the tendency of menstruation and let go, you will kind of just literally feel something sloughing off you if you don't fight the process and you just let go and let go and let go. And the more that you can just let go and really be kind with yourself, and what will start to happen is this amazing, what we call the oxytocin wash can happen. So you get this marvelous, the bliss and love hormone. What's not to like about that, Francis? And it is given to us freely each month when we do nothing. Even better, we just do nothing. We hang out. And at menstruation, and then this lovely soothing happens. It's like being washed with love. I have to admit, as a postmenopausal woman, that is the one thing I miss, not having that each month. So you get this incredible anointing, really, of this feeling of love. And it is like an affirmation of who we are. And then we really plug into ourselves. We really ground into something and sort of remember who we are. So it's like getting your true north back again and going, oh, that's what I'm about. Oh, yeah. So it's this menstruation is where you kind of tank up on love and an affirmation of yourself, and as well as just good old-fashioned rest. So it's like So really at menstruation, it's like your being is being rewired again, and you're being restored to yourself, you're being rewired, and you're getting rid of stuff that's not you, and there's this lovely realignment that happens that just sets you up for a lovely, fresh, new cycle out in the world again. So I used to think of menstruation as home base, isn't it, Sjanie? Home, deep home. Where we just, where our soul is nourished and our body gets nourished too.
Yeah, it's a sort of refueling place. But as you said, Alexandra, it's this lovely emptying out and letting go and cleansing. And then the next season that follows, the inner spring, it's from that emptying out and that kind of detox and cleansing that there's this new life can come in, and this repair and restoration. And the inner spring is that. It's like the possibility of new beginnings and new life and repair, and it allows for something new to be generated. But you have to have that letting go and that clearing out in order for this new lease on life to happen, actually, for this renewal to happen. And that's the inner spring. It has this lovely, the energy in the inner spring. There's a natural rise in energy. It has a sort of uplifting quality. And it really needs us to kind of go gently. So instead of being full steam ahead, getting on with stuff and being busy and driven and goal orientated, that can just kill this renewal. It requires like a little bit of a light touch, but easygoing, but more playful. Sort of drop your goals and agendas in your drive for a while, and just play with the renewal, play with the lightness. It sort of needs that kind of freedom, really. So there's an innocence required in this season, or a youthfulness even. Yeah,
it's like you get a fresh start on life again. It's just
you do.
It's like
you do.
Optimism that returns, and hope.
Yeah.
And I think in terms of healing, it is really, really important. It's like a sense of, oh yeah, I can do this. It's a new sense of possibility. And so I think it's kind of a really natural time, isn't it, Sjanie, for sort of reaffirming one's intentions almost, although we like to do that at menstruation as well.
Yeah.
But it's like getting reaffirming something and getting going.
Yeah, kind of nurturing your intentions in a way.
That's a good way of putting it.
Really nurturing your intentions. Actually, this is a very nurturing season in many ways, because when you get to the inner summer, there's this, you're really, this is the peak of the cycle, so you're much more outward focused now, and it's less about nurturing you and your own kind of new beginnings, and it becomes much more about others. And of course, you've got more energy in this season, and you naturally feel more resilient and kind of full and overflowing. It's much easier to be generous. So I'm talking, this is in a, if you're run down and not well rested, and especially if you haven't had a good amount of rest at menstruation, that emptying out that happens at menstruation is what allows for this kind of fullness and generosity and ease in the summer. This is the season when potentially you can have it all and you can really juggle all the plates. And Frances, you probably know this with your being a mother and a businesswoman and all this. The inner summers often has this feeling of like, I've got it all under control. I can do this all. I can do everything. I'm Superwoman. This is the season where we really can do that. And in terms of healing, this is the season where we can really access beauty and pleasure and sensuality, really get nourished through pleasure. Actually, pleasure is a huge source of nourishment and healing for us women that often gets overlooked and untapped. But this is the season when pleasure can really fill us up and keep us soothed and keep us connected to our bodies. And
I think, Sjanie, I'd love to come in there because that word connection is important, because actually we're most connected to other people, I think, at this time. We find it easiest to be connected to the community at this time, to belong. Yes, it's a season that's easy to love, actually, generally speaking. Not all women love their inner summer, but there is a kind of ebullience Yes, Sjanie, I think you said it beautifully, actually. And then the wheel turns, doesn't it? And we move from that pinnacle, that height of summer, into the autumn phase of the cycle. And this phase has had some bad press, really. We've not always been appreciated and loved for the woman that we can become in this phase of the cycle. And there's a lot more complexity here. And the truth is, we're a lot more challenging and provocative here, because we tap into another very different kind of power in the autumn. Gosh, it's so multi-layered. I think I'm just going to have to feel my way carefully with the powers here. And Sjanie, do come in as I step tenderly into this phase. But it's a little bit like the veils start parting, you know. In the first half of the cycle, you've got this lovely outward energy towards the world. And now you're just turning towards yourself again. And you are actually just starting to become a little bit more permeable. You're not quite so ebullient and resilient. But what this means is that you have a lot more insight and knowing that starts to happen. So here in the autumn, you have, if I can say it, just more kind of shamanic kind of energies come in, a capacity to see into things and to know things. And you also have a real truth-speaking voice at this time. And there's a very instinctual power that arises that is very strong and very authoritative. So you can also really assert your boundaries very strongly. And I think in terms of healing and so on, boundaries are everything. It's just so important to have good, sturdy, strong boundaries. And often when we, I'm just thinking if we're in chronic exhaustion and so on, it may be because we've been too permeable and too open to everything and too giving. And here we learn about what is me and what is not me. It's very precise. We talk about it as feedback time, don't we, Sjanie? This is the moment where you truly get feedback on how you're doing, whether what you're doing is working or not. And it's like an inner voice comes up in you to yourself and goes, nah, what are you doing with that person? Or why are you doing that? Or what were you thinking? Whereas, you know, there you were in your summer, la, 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 you know, all things are fine, everything, and suddenly, out of nowhere. It's very
It's a huge reality check moment, actually. The big reality check of, you know, what's working, what's not working, what matters to me, what doesn't matter to me. And because your intuition is so much stronger in the inner autumn, you really know what's it and what's not it. So it's a very good time to listen to yourself, really, and to, as Alexandra said, and to really feel what is it for you and what's not it for you. So you come back to yourself in a very strong way. And that's so important for healing, because it's like check in with yourself and check in with how you're doing and adjust accordingly, really. Amazing time of feedback and and insight in our autumn.
I would say that's the key thing of self-care, isn't it, Sjanie?
Yeah.
This insight and feedback.
Yeah, and also this is the season when the energy in the cycle starts to wane. So the energy contracts. So the first half of the cycle, the spring and the summer, is this expansion and this rising energy. And now there's this waning energy and a contraction of energy. So you're having to slow down, which is really healing in and of itself. There's this call to kind of come inward, to step back, to slow down. And it's that helps us to create this balance in our life and helps us to find equilibrium and not kind of lose ourselves and not overshoot ourselves. And as Alexandra said in the beginning, this thing of pacing ourselves, the inner autumn really keeps you in tune with yourself.
So much. I could hear you speaking for so long, and so much wisdom in everything you share. And I was wondering if you can specifically start to point to looking at women who are on a healing path from chronic illness, which is many of the women that we're watching this video, and how following the cycle can support their healing journey from chronic illness. You pointed to it already somewhat, but just a bit more specific.
Yes, let's just feel into that a little bit more. And, you know, I would just so want to say this can be the bedrock of healing, to be practicing cycle awareness. Because, and I'm going to just reiterate some things here, and there may be something fresh that I can add in. It's like a container that holds us, the menstrual cycle. It's like you're held by something. And it's also a guide to yourself. So you're held in this rhythm. So it immediately gives a kind of feeling of resting in something, which I think is really, really important.
Yeah, you can let go of control in some ways because you're being held.
And then as you pace the rhythm of your cycle each day, you are really pacing, as I said earlier, your nervous system. Now, at the background of all illness, this is, I think, just really understood now today, is inflammation. Inflammation is just behind I would say, every illness. Is the way I understand it when I've listened to people speak about this. And so anything that is soothing for us is medicine. So cycle awareness is an act of pacing your nervous system, which is an act of soothing yourself. This is really, really important. And then what you start to do is, as you get to know the pattern of your cycle, you get to organize your life around this rhythm. So you would know that there are certain times in the cycle month where you would choose not to do certain things because it's too high energy or too public. For example, for myself, the day before menstruation, I felt so see-through, so vulnerable. It was also the most powerful place in the cycle for me, for all sorts of reasons. But if I had to be public, I could be, if someone criticized me on that day, they could mortally wound me. I did not want to be public. And I knew when it was coming because my cycle was regular. Now that's a huge act of self-respect and self-love. And in not putting myself out there, I'm really also keeping my nervous system soothed. And I'm also getting the benefits that time brings. And that time requires privacy and not being public in the world. So not only am I kind of pacing and soothing my nervous system, my own nature, but I'm actually then able to draw on the benefits of the cycle. So, you know, we talked about the medicine, the treasure chest that is in each phase of the cycle. As you practice cycle awareness, you can get these benefits. But it is this thing of soothing, Frances. It's just extraordinarily soothing. And having this way of checking in with your energy, because it's your stress-sensitive system, the menstrual cycle for women. So it's giving you feedback on how you're traveling, who you are on the inside, and what's happening on the outside. So you have the whole cycle is a feedback system. Never mind the autumn. The autumn is a sort of very amplified feedback time, but actually, subtly, the whole cycle is a feedback process if you're monitoring it. So I would suggest for women who are suffering overall with any kind of health condition, whatever it is, to absolutely put in cycle awareness, partly because it costs nothing. It's there. It's yours. It's inside you. It gives you a direct line to yourself. And the thing that we love about cycle awareness is that the more you do it, the more inner kindness you have. It's just it's a miracle, that, isn't it, Sjanie? We hear it time and again with women. This lovely inner sweetness and inner kindness grows. And I know that is a medicine all its own, that inner kindness. It's absolutely a medicine all its own. the other thing you're doing when you're doing cycle awareness is you're tuning yourself more and more to yourself. So you're getting more and more insight about what you need for your health, which I think is really crucial, about what literally, very practically, what kind of remedy to pursue for yourself, what feels right for you and what doesn't feel right for you. It's just brilliant. I mean, it's just an outrage that we don't know this.
Yeah. Can I just add one other thing? Because I'm thinking about chronic illness and how overwhelming it can be to have to do this practice or that practice, or there's so much good stuff out there. But one thing that's beautiful about cycle awareness is it doesn't actually require very much of us. No matter how we're feeling, just bringing attention to where we are in our cycle and noting where we are and finding a small way to honor that and respect that. It's just the smallest shift in attention goes a really, really long way in terms of the healing it can bring. That's the other thing that I think is so worthwhile, is it doesn't take much to release the powers of the menstrual cycle. It doesn't take that much of a shift to start to feel the support of the cycle and the medicine of the cycle, as opposed to what most of us experience when we aren't aware of our cycle, which is feeling messed around by a cycle and kind of having to go against ourselves and override something, which creates a huge amount of stress. So just the shift in relationship to our cycle will pay huge dividends and really go a long way in terms of helping restore balance and wellness and all that kind of good stuff.
Great, thank you. I think it's a really powerful medicine that isn't perhaps being tapped into fully, the power of following the menstrual cycle, which we really want to make central to what we're doing at the Women's Wellness Circle. So we are coming to the end of the interview time, but just briefly, if you could just briefly speak to postmenopausal women and how this work can benefit that stage of life as well, and that stage of life as well.
This one's for you, Alexandra, given that you have walked that road.
Well, if you are already post-menopause, you no longer have this cyclical rhythm of the menstrual cycle working you. However, as post-menopause women, we still have a need for rest. So I just don't, if I speak for myself now, what the menstrual cycle, working with the menstrual cycle, of course, gave me a template of self-care, which carries on post-menopause. Now, if you're only discovering this work now, having stopped menstruating, you're going to have to really work quite consciously and deliberately. So I really want to say to post-menopause women, you have the same need for rest as when you were menstruating, but you don't have that monthly marker. And so to find ways, to find your own rhythmic, because I think rhythm is our first remedy. Any kind of rhythm, actually, never mind the menstrual cycle, but all rhythms are medicine. And honoring rhythms is just restorative and healing. So to just have rhythm in our lives, to find rhythm. And if you're really new to this work, you could just chart with the phases of the moon. Now, I do pay attention to the moon cycle, and because I can really feel how it affects me. It's not like, it doesn't affect me as strongly as the menstrual cycle, on the contrary, but it still has an effect. It is distinct. And I really pay attention to that in what I'm doing. I also, so that's a good way in for a woman post-menopause who's wanting to, who's really interested in our work and would like to recover something of the menstrual cycle. Chart with the moon. And so we're on the new moon, actually, aren't we now? Or it was on the weekend.
A couple of days, yeah.
Days ago. So day one of the new moon is day one of the cycle, for those, if you want to chart. And so I would really, really recommend that, actually, as a way of just restoring this idea of helping to restore this idea of rhythmic life as a starting place. And also, to do that, but actually, for instance, I know this may sound really daft, but to actually read our book Wild Power, and just because in the reading of it, you're going to recover something and just reconfigure your menstruating years. There's something you can just do imaginatively that starts to just put the pieces of your life together and help to make greater meaning out of what you have lived. It's interesting. And it may sound daft to do that, but I would actually recommend it if you are really keen on recovering this. But I really just want to say, just look for rhythm in your life overall and take rest. You know, rest is, I love rest. And it's just so efficient. Resting is just so efficient. You know, I, for instance, one of my little patterns is I just love half an hour or 20 minutes or even 15 or even 10 minutes after lunch. Sjanie knows me. And I just need to switch everything off. I want to lie down and switch everything off. And then I just come back. It isn't just about my body. It's actually about my brain. And it's just great. I just come back with a new insight, a new take on things. You know, do not get caught in this nutty cultural thinking that you just have to keep going. That is just the royal route to disaster.
Yeah, thank you so much. My womb is loving all the wisdom that you've shared, and also I thank you for specifically giving me permission to rest fully on day one. I really learned that from you, and from just actually not even having to necessarily meditate or do gentle yoga, but just to rest and do absolutely nothing. Yeah.
Do nothing.
Yeah.
You know, yes.
Thank you. So if the women that work with us want to work with you further, can you share your website address, or, you know, how they can find out more of your work to work with you?
Sure. Well, our main website is redschool.net, where you can find out all about us. And then we've got some online programs, which you can find at redschoolonline.net. We've got a couple of free courses there and some other courses to sort of introduce you more to cycle awareness and body literacy and working with your menstrual cycle and menopause. We've got a course on menopause there as well. They are redschoolonline.net for the online courses.
Wonderful. Great. Thank you. Well, thank you so much for talking with me today, and I'm sure you'll support many women through doing this interview with me today. So thank you very much. And if you want to find out more about my work, I'm at francisgoodall.com and also womenswellnesscircle.com. Okay, thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you, Frances.